The state of ufology today in the 21st century is rather complexing. The problems that we have is that we have a lot of fake news, usually through the internet, as well as media, newspapers, those sort of things. We also have fanciful stories with very little evidence, and this really does muddy the waters. Of course, in some investigations were carried out very well throughout the 1940s, some actually even better than actually carried out today. What's most interesting is that at one time investigators thought the evidence lies within photographs and video footage, but now it seems to be just another stone added to the mountain we've already got. However, probably the most significant are those incidents that recorded and photographed UFOs from the 1940s onwards, long before the signs of any internet, any software, manipulation software for photographs or videos, and long before people had the idea of actually fake news and such fanciful stories. Nevertheless, I still believe some of these earlier pieces of video footage really do show some authentic phenomena. Take for instance the Battle of LA that took place on February 28, 1942, yes, during the heightened part of the Second World War over Los Angeles. What's interesting is that there were a huge amount of information in regarding this particular incident. What actually unfolded that night is a little bit unknown still, because there are differing pieces of information which you go backwards and forwards as to what this object could have been. The story unfolds such as 2 balloons were actually launched from San Francisco. It is proven and tracked on radar. These were allegedly already taken down. Everybody was a bit jittery around about that time. It was only the night before the Japanese had already conducted an attack on LA from submarines. But what actually happened was an object was tracked on radar by the military. And of course it travelled over towards Los Angeles, causing quite a stir. Enough to think that it was actually Japanese bombers. In fact, some people actually reported seeing Japanese bombers, even though we now know that Japan didn't actually send any over at that time. No aircraft over Los Angeles. So what was this mystery object? Other people reported seeing a bunch of balloons, or one large balloon as a weather balloon.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific wartime this morning. The anti-aircraft guns began barking during a blackout ordered by the 4th Interceptor Command at 2:25 a.m. The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach. Army officials declined to comment on the possibility that the object might have been a blimp. However, it required nearly 30 minutes to travel some 25 miles, far slower than an airplane. Watchers on the rooftop of the Columbia Broadcasting Building in the heart of Hollywood could plainly see the flashes of guns and searchlights sweeping the skies in a wide arc along the coastal area. Concussion of the shells could be felt in downtown Los Angeles, 15 miles away. U.S. Army planes quickly took to the dark sky, but whether they contacted the object has not been announced. Army officials say they will not comment until they receive a full report of the action.
There are numerous different stories out there. However, what actually unfolded was that the military bombarded a barrage of the anti-aircraft artillery on this particular object. It was flooded by searchlights for over an hour. What's fascinating is that there were some reports to suggest that they made several direct impacts on this object. Not one of them seemingly brought it down or even damaged it. It didn't even sway it from its course. It just trajected through the sky until it disappeared. We don't know what it was. There was no answer to it. Interestingly, a number of people were injured, and that was basically from the falling shrapnel, from the debris. But we don't actually know what the object was. Surely if it was a weather balloon, just one at least of these anti-aircraft projectiles would have damaged it, bringing down that balloon. But that actually wasn't the case. So that you can understand there was a bit of a disagreement between the army here, which said no way was that a weather balloon, and the military, Air Force, saying it must have been an air balloon. There's a number of photographs that have been taken of that incident. One which shows the UFO. It's a very famous photograph. Most people will recognize it. However, there are a number of other photographs taken that night as well, which didn't show anything unusual in the sky. There was only the one particular photograph that showed anything. And of course, all we were left with the following day was news stories. People reporting that the shrapnel had hit their homes, had buried itself in their pavements outside their homes, and stories like this. Of course, it was a hell of a stir. People were very upset. And in this particular case, we're left with no answers. Was it a plane? Was it a balloon? Was it something else? The mystery remains. Said to be one of the very first pieces of UFO footage ever filmed is the Montana Great Falls footage from 1950. Let's just take a look at this video. On August the 15th, 1950, in Great Falls, Montana, around about 11:25 a.m., two unusual objects were sighted and recorded. Noting that the wind was only 25 to 28 miles per hour and only reaching 37 miles per hour by 12:30 p.m, the objects were seemingly moving against the wind, which rules out the possibility of any balloons. The whole case was investigated by the United States Air Force, and they released their conclusion stating that it was the sun's reflection of two F-94 aircraft in the area. The footage was recorded by Nick Mera. He went on to describe the objects as bright and silvery, rotating while flying over the Great Falls at speed. He estimated them to be 200 to 400 miles per hour. He believed that they were roughly 50 feet wide and about 150 feet apart. This was filmed on a 16mm movie camera for about 60 seconds, and as you can see in the footage, you can clearly see these two objects in flight. What is interesting is that Nick Mera stated that he first went out and saw these objects. They were moving across the sky. Then they actually stopped, completely stopped. At that point, he rushed off to the car to grab his camera and start filming them. Just as he pressed record on the camera, these objects were moving. And unfortunately, we didn't see them in a stationary position. But he did describe that when looking at them, he reckoned that they were actually disc-shaped. Also, what's also to take into consideration is that at that time, Nick was reforming the minor league baseball team. And this couldn't have really come at a better time, to be honest with you, because Nick went on to show his video of these objects at different events and different places, tied in to publicising the minor league baseball team. So it kind of helped out for him in a way. What is interesting is that the footage has really never been explained. One thing is for sure, it doesn't seem to be two F-94 aircraft, as you can see what an F-94 aircraft is like, and these don't look nothing like them. What Nick actually said was that sometime later after filming these two objects, two F-94s did actually cross over in that location, maybe in pursuit of these objects, who knows. But unfortunately, the United States Air Force concluded on Nick's video that they were reflections off the side of the F-94 fighters as they flew over. And of course, they were flying reasonably slow if that was the case. And under analysis, under enhancement, you don't see no wings, no tails. These simply are not F-94s. Nick Mera had this to say about the incident.
As I looked up, I saw two silvery objects moving swiftly out of the northwest. They appeared to be moving directly south. The objects were very bright and about 10,000 feet in the air. They appeared to be of a bright, shiny metal, like polished silver. Both were the same size and were traveling at the same rate of speed, which was much slower than the jets which shot by shortly after I filmed the discs. Suddenly, they stopped. It was then I remembered the camera in the glove compartment of my car. I raced downstairs, yelling for my secretary, Miss Virginia Ronnie. The distance from the top of the stairway to my car is about 60 feet, and I must have made that in about 6 jumps. I asked my secretary if she saw anything, and she said yes, 2 silvery spheres. I unlocked the glove compartment of my car, took out the camera, turned the telephoto lens on the turret into position, set the camera at f/22, picked up the objects in the viewfinder, and pressed the trigger. The discs appeared to be spinning like a top and were about 50 feet across and about 50 yards apart. I could not see any exhaust, wings, or any kind of fuselage. There was no cabin, no odor, no sound, except I thought I heard a whooshing sound when I first saw them. As the film clicked through the camera, I could see the objects moving southeast behind the General Mills grain building and the black water tank directly south of the ballpark. I filmed the objects until they disappeared into the blue sky behind the water tank.
But it wasn't the last time these things were going to show up. Only 2 years later in Utah, these things were seen and recorded again on 16mm film. On July the 2nd, 1952, Delbert Newhouse also caught something strange on his 16mm camera, which was also to back up the incident from Montana 1950, as he seemingly not only recorded the same type of phenomena, but multiple of these objects. Let's take a look at the film.
About 7 miles after we passed through Trail Mountain, Utah, my wife noticed a group of objects in the sky that she could not identify. I pulled over to the side of the road, stopped, got out, looked up, and saw the objects.
Navy warrant officer Delbert Newhouse, who filmed the formation of bright objects over the town in Utah, said that a number of people had studied his film for a number of months. And an organisation had also stated in January 93 that they had concluded what these objects represented. It was in fact the sponsored CIA Robertson panel, and they concluded that these were nothing more than birds in flight. We are aware that birds do have reflective underbellies, certainly like seagulls and birds like that. And they can seem to reflect light from the ground, even street lighting in some cases. On a sunny day, they can be seen to be white dots in the sky, especially when at a high altitude. Most of the time they're flying in formation. However, what we're actually seeing in Delbert Newhouse's film is something that I would not consider to be birds. They seem to be self-emitting light, like we've seen before, these UFO orbs or balls of light. Whatever they represent is very similar to the Montana 1950 footage that was taken only 2 years earlier. Now, we continue to have these sightings regularly around the world, especially in Mexico City. But it seems to me that whatever Delbert Newhouse recorded was more or less the same thing, except for the fact that there were more of them in the sky. And of course, they didn't seem to move like birds neither. I think, as far as it comes down to the CIA's sponsored Robertson panel's conclusion was that it was an inaccurate one, or one that was just to dismiss the incident. Nevertheless, though, I wasn't satisfied with that conclusion, and I'm sure a lot of other investigators out there might not be. There were a number of radar confirmations by the United States Air Force in regards to strange objects that travelled over the Washington Capitol that evening. There are a number of reconstructed photographs about this event. One of the most famous photographs is the one that you can see, where the objects over Washington DC buildings. It was interesting to note that members of the 142nd Fighter Interceptor Squadron were sent up from into Washington DC in pursuit of these objects, but they never actually caught them. As to where these objects went, we just simply don't know. They vanished off radar and from sight. As in many incidences, what was left behind was just a number of interesting newspaper cuttings and articles from people who saw these objects in the sky, didn't know what they were, and of course perplexed members of the public, not to mention perplexed people in the military. At 5:32 a.m. on April the 20th, 1964, at Holloman Air Force Base, another incident was to unfold. Two pilots in a helicopter doing reconnaissance work was in the location of Holloman Air Force Base that early morning, and they saw three objects travelling out of the western sky. They were described as three shiny discs, and they shot by. Now, what was interesting is their count was that these objects separated. Two of them moved higher up in altitude and separated and became stationary, as the third object seemingly descended towards the tarmac airstrip of Holloman Air Force Base. They apparently recorded up to 600 feet of video film of this event. Meanwhile, back at the base, they were doing their own recording. Holloman Air Force Base Tower confirmed radar confirmation of these objects and the one that was slowly descending towards the tarmac. Video recording that took place at the base was said to be up to 800 feet of film. The object was seen to slowly descend to the tarmac, and from underneath the craft, its three legs were seen to have come out and landed. Meanwhile, officers and emergency vehicles were on their way, travelling towards this vehicle at the end of the runway to find out what this thing was. When they got there, they were surprised to see that a door opened and apparently two beings come out, certainly not looking human. Story has it that these beings were shorter than the average man, were grey in complexion, wearing grey tight jumpsuits, very tight fitting, and looked peculiar, like a rope design round their heads, slightly large noses, maybe something in their ears or something longer coming from their ears. And they apparently communicated with these beings. The story takes an interesting twist when it comes to the release of a documentary on July the 31st, 1974, known as UFO It Has Begun. It also has another working title, UFO Past, Present and Future. There's a small clip of this incident that unfolded at Holloman Air Force Base, but only a few seconds. You can clearly see from the footage that we have the object descending slowly towards the tarmac with the mountains in the distance. Up further in the sky, which you cannot see on film, were another two of these objects stationary, as if on looking or looking out. The rumour has it is that this was a considerably lengthy piece of footage that was provided to the people making the documentary. Taken in consideration, this documentary was the only one that's ever been officially sanctioned by the United States Air Force. Interesting. The footage in question was said to have come from Holloman Air Force Base and was submitted to the documentary filmmakers as part of a sequence to be put into the documentary. It was supposed to show the UFO descending, landing onto the tarmac, and of course this meeting taking place, several pieces of film, maybe some photographs, and so on and so forth. One of the most interesting things is the reasoning behind why this piece of footage might be released to people making a documentary. Well, the story has it is that around about that time they were considering a full disclosure program, and there was said to be some type of project, be it called, I think it was called Project Sideshow, I believe. There are numerous different references to this, and it was said to be like a show that would go from place to place, from town to town, from city to city, and would provide information, photographs about the UFOs, about the ETs, about how long they've been here. In fact, it was a kind of full disclosure program. And I don't know if that's true or not, but what is interesting is that the story has it that this piece of footage was going to be put into this video and was going to be part of this event. And also, in other words, people who couldn't go to see this sideshow or wanted to find out more could see the information within a video. And at the last very moment, I believe a general had decided this isn't right, we maybe shouldn't be doing this, and pulled the footage. And of course, the documentary, and of course the people that made the documentary were obviously very happy. And the United States Air Force just gave them a few seconds of the actual UFO, of that original footage, just to put in there to keep them happy. If that is the case, then we may have been on the verge of a disclosure then, back in the 1970s. There's also the question why the United States Air Force would officially sanction a UFO documentary film. That's suspicious in itself. Nevertheless, though, it's an interesting story. We don't know about the truth behind it, but one thing is for sure is that is real footage and is said to be a real UFO. And we can see that descending, and it matches up to the mountains of that location of Holloman Air Force Base, which took place in 1964. This can't be confused, of course, with the alleged incidents that took place with President Eisenhower on February 11th, 1955 at Holloman Air Force Base, where he was supposed to have an alleged alien encounter or meet up with aliens. If that is the case, then the UFO that landed at Holloman in 1964 isn't the first. There's been ones before. Or if it's just a fabricated story, it certainly would make sense, because when we listen to the audio from the official audio commentary from the Holloman Air Force Base military officers, we don't get any references such as we've seen, or here's another one, or this has happened before, or anything like that. It seems to be that they're all startled, all surprised, certainly a security issue. They're trying to find out what it is, what's going on, and it's a fascinating piece of audio that you can listen to. Edward Air Force Base has also been privy to UFO phenomena. If we look at an incident that took place in October the 7th, 1965, a squadron of UFOs was seen over the military base, which caused quite a stir. Military jets were launched, confirmation between other military establishments where there was communications taking place trying to figure out what the hell these things were, and they were seen for a considerable length of time, I believe up to almost 6 hours. Shows a strange object which seemingly looks to be changing shape. Very unusual craft which was recorded for a duration of time on high-speed camera film. Let's have a look at the video.
This is the tower in Edwards. We have an object now over the field. He is right over the field. Right over Edwards, moving southward fairly rapidly. And this thing also has, I can make out red and white flashing lights. And the captain at Step 1 has confirmed this. He can also see this. He can also see this. Does it make any sense to you what it could possibly be? No, we're in as much as dark light as you are. San Pedro is painting them 3 targets, and they're all 3 around 9,000. San Pedro is picking them up at 9,000. Roger. What about Boron? Boron, we're working with them to see if we can get them on them now. But those 3 little dots out there, I'll say that there are 3 definite objects. It is not weather, it's not clutter. They see the objects, but they don't see they're not aircraft. No, they can't tell what they are. Scramble on. You gotta scramble on them.
It seems that UFOs have a close connection with many military bases around the world, and maybe that they're monitoring our technology or interested in our development. Nevertheless, though, an incident that unfolded in November 1994 over Nellis is one of the most significant pieces of military video footage of a UFO ever captured. The Nellis Range is situated about 40 miles northwest of Las Vegas. and comprises around about 4,700 square miles. Mostly that's desert. And approximately at 4 p.m. travelling from the east came an unusual object that was first picked up on radar 24 miles out heading towards them. By the time it reached the facility, it had slowed down and was moving erratically. The camera footage that you're about to see is taken from that event, and you can clearly see that the UFO, whatever this object is, seemingly looks to be changing shape. This is by far one of the most significant pieces of video footage said to be of military origin ever released to the general public. It does clearly show an object, and it's electronically stamped and tracked. There's also audio dialogue that goes with it, hand in hand, of an event that they have yet to confirm exists. Nevertheless, though, this information was leaked to the general public and it's fallen into our hands, and yes, it is quite an incredible piece of footage nonetheless. UFOs continue to be seen and video recorded in the vicinity of the Black Mountain radar domes, which is just on the ridgeline heading towards Nellis Air Force Range. These objects have been seen as bright colours, flashing, disappearing, reappearing, sometimes in quantities of 2 to 4. Even people have recorded structured craft that they cannot identify. We don't know if it's some type of exotic aircraft that's being test flown around the Nellis Air Force Range, which is a possibility, or it is in fact something else. Identifying UFOs has become somewhat difficult as we advance in aviation technology and capabilities. New methods of investigation and research in regards to aerial phenomena can be found in a new course known as the UITC, the UFO Investigators Training Course or Reference Guide. It's the most comprehensive study program to date.
UFOs? Nah, they're only seen by country bumpkins who've drunk too much moonshine. Well, that's what many skeptics say. But what would they say if dozens of highly trained, psychologically stable Air Force personnel who are in charge of intercontinental ballistic missiles have claimed to see them? It all starts with a single, very simple sighting, one night in early February 1967. A sighting that, arguably, could be dismissed as merely an optical aberration, if it weren't for what happened afterwards that, as we'll see, threatened the very security of the United States. That February night, Captain Don Crawford was the deputy crew commander on duty at Echo Flight Launch Control Center of Malmstrom Air Force Base in central Montana. A two-person security alert team assigned to Echo Flight was performing a routine check of the missile launch facilities a few miles north of Lewistown, Montana. As they approached one of the launch facilities, an astonishing sight caused the driver to slam on his brakes. Stunned in amazement, they watched as about 300 feet ahead, a very large glowing object hovered directly over the launch facility. One of them picked up his walkie-talkie and called Captain Crawford.
"Sir, you won't believe what I'm looking at,"
he said. And Crawford didn't believe him at first, but the young man insisted that he was telling the truth, his voice revealing his heightened emotional state. Eventually, Crawford took him seriously enough to call the command post to report it. But the officer on duty refused to accept the report and simply stated,
"We no longer record those kinds of report,"
clearly indicating that he didn't want to hear about UFOs. Captain Crawford was unsure of what to tell his shaken security guard and decided to give him permission to fire his weapon at the object if it seemed hostile.
Thanks, sir, but I really don't think it'll do any good."
And a few seconds later, the object silently flew away. Actually, he wasn't the only one to see an unidentified flying object that night. According to articles from the Great Falls Tribune newspaper on February the 8th, 1967, several respected local citizens had called in with similar stories. One resident, Louis de Leon, while driving east of Chester, Montana, less than 100 miles from Echo Flight, saw two strange objects in the sky that didn't look like airplanes and glowed with an orange and red colour. Later, 10 miles east of Chester, Jake Walkman was apparently wakened by a bright light at his home. From his backyard he saw a flying saucer-shaped object. And the next evening, George Kawanishi, a foreman for the Great Northern Railroad, saw a bright ball of light in the sky directly above the Chester train depot. But things took an unexpected and dangerous turn on the morning of Thursday, March the 16th, 1967.
There are numerous similar incidents from around the world where UFOs have seemingly disrupted military facilities, in some cases causing ICBMs to mysteriously shut down and also triggering a launch mechanism only to stop at the last minute or so. Pretty scary stuff, yeah? There are similar accounts at Soviet military bases as well. So we have to ask, could this be some type of demonstration of force? And if so, what message is being delivered here?
It wasn't just a couple of Air Force personnel who saw UFOs, but as we said earlier, dozens. And one of them, Deputy Missile Combat Crew Commander Robert Salas, based at the Echo Flight Launch Control Center, not only witnessed these UFOs, along with many of his colleagues, but has also given us a detailed report in his excellent book, Unidentified, the UFO Phenomenon, How World Governments Have Conspired to Conceal Humanity's Biggest Secret.
I've had numerous discussions with Robert Salas. What I found most interesting is that Robert not only went into great detail about his incident in his book, but also outlines a number of personal experiences he had after witnessing this event. This is not the first time I've heard of this. There are a number of people who have had these similar experiences.
On that chilly morning, Captain Eric Carlson and First Lieutenant Walt Figel, leaders of the Echo Flight Missile Combat Crew, were below ground in the Echo Flight Launch Control Center about 15 miles north of Lewistown. Missile maintenance crews and security teams were camped out at two of the launch facilities, having performed some work the previous day, and were meant to be sleeping over. But there wasn't much sleep that night. In the early hours, they were woken by strange sounds coming from the compound. Rushing outside, they looked up. Their jaws dropped. Clear as anything, they saw a UFO hovering over the base. But it got worse, much worse. At about 8:30 in the morning, Echo Flight Base resounded with the noise of the alarm horn. One of the Minuteman missiles that they guarded and maintained had become inoperable, or in the Air Force jargon, gone off alert. It was the missile near where the maintenance crews were located. Walt Figel, the deputy crew commander, said,
What the heck are they playing at?
he thought that the maintenance personnel had started work on the missile, making it inoperable at first, of course, and had failed to notify the base, hence the alarm. Figel immediately called the missile site, determined to give them the rough edge of his tongue. But the on-site security guard said no, they'd not started any maintenance yet. He also informed Figel that a UFO had been seen hovering over the site. Figel recalls thinking that the guard must have been drinking on duty, but he soon changed his mind when other missiles started to go off alert in rapid succession. Within seconds, the entire flight of 10 ICBMs were down. All the missiles reported a no-go condition. When the checklist procedure had been completed for each missile site, it was discovered that each of the missiles had gone off alert due to a systems fault. The missile's guidance and control systems had all malfunctioned for some inexplicable reason. 2 security alert teams were immediately dispatched, though Figel had said nothing about the UFO, for obvious reasons. On arrival, the security alert teams reported back that now multiple UFOs had been seen hovering over each of the 2 sites by all of the maintenance and security personnel present at each location. Later that morning, the relieving senior officer, Captain Don Crawford, remembering the February incident, took over command. Crawford recalls that both Carlson and Figel were visibly shaken by what had occurred. The maintenance crews worked on the inoperable missiles for the entire day and late into the night to bring them all back on alert. It was a very worrying situation. There had been no missile defences for an entire day. Because of this disturbing incident, as a retired missile engineer put it, all hell broke loose. Among the many calls to and from the Echo Flight Launch Control Center, one was to the crew commander of Oscar Flight, near the town of Roy, about 20 miles southeast of Echo, where something similar had happened that same morning. Outside, above Oscar Flight's subterranean base, it was a typical clear, cold Montana night sky with a few inches of snow on the ground. There were no city lights to detract from the spectacular array of stars. One of the early-duty airmen there had been skywatching and saw what at first appeared to be a star begin to zigzag across the sky. Then he saw another light do the same thing, and this time it was larger and closer. He asked his flight security controller to come and take a look. They both stood there watching the light streak directly above them, stop, change directions at high speed, and return overhead. The controller ran into the building and phoned Robert Salas, the deputy crew commander in the underground base. He reported that they had been seeing lights making strange maneuvers over the facility and that they weren't aircraft. Robert replied,
Okay. Just keep watching them and let me know if they get any closer.
Robert was a little puzzled. He presumed that it was a joke they were playing on him. But that sort of behaviour was definitely out of character for Air Force security police officers whose communications were usually very professional. A few minutes later, the security officer called again. This time he was clearly frightened and was shouting his words.
Sir, there's one hovering outside the front gate.
One what?
A UFO. It's just sitting there. We're all just looking at it. What do you want us to do?
What? What does it look like?
Robert asked.
I can't really describe it, sir. It's glowing red. What are we supposed to do?
Robert said,
Make sure the site is secure and I'll phone command base.
Sir, I have to go now. One of the guys just got injured.
And before Robert could ask about the injury, the airman ended the call. Robert immediately went over to the commander, Lieutenant Fred Mewald, who was on a scheduled sleep period. He woke him and started to brief him about the phone calls. But in the middle of their conversation, both Robert and Fred heard the alarm echo through the confined space of the base, and both immediately looked over at the panel of warning lights at the commander's station. A no-go light and 2 red security lights were lit, indicating problems at one of the missile bases. But before they could do anything, another alarm went off at another site, then another, and another. within seconds they had lost 8 missiles to a no-go condition. Once topside, Robert spoke directly with a security team about the UFO. They said it had a red glow and appeared to be saucer-shaped, and repeated that it had been hovering immediately outside the front gate. Robert then sent a security patrol to check the launch facilities, and they reported sighting yet another UFO during that patrol. Strangely, they lost radio contact with the site immediately afterwards. When the scheduled replacement crew arrived later that morning, the missiles still hadn't been brought back online. An urgent, in-depth investigation of the Echo flight incident was undertaken, requiring full-scale on-site and laboratory tests at the Boeing Company's Seattle plant. Robert Kaminsky was the Boeing Company engineering team leader for this investigation and said, "After all tests were done, we could find no significant failures, engineering data or findings that would explain how 10 missiles were knocked off alert."
It's been reported that UFOs have affected control systems at numerous military facilities by firing a pencil beam type laser down onto the ground near these ICBMs. It's thought that this laser can penetrate through solid materials to hit certain equipment and electronics. Such an incident is also assumed to have taken place at the United States Air Force facility here in the UK at Rendlesham in 1980. When such incidents like this happen, we have to ask, how do they know about our infrastructure? UFOs are seemingly monitoring energy plants, chemical facilities, civilian airports, military bases, etc., all around the world. Luckily for us, they don't seem to be often hostile. If they were, it would be a whole different ballgame, I assure you.
One conclusion proposed was that a pulse could have been sent in from outside the shielded system, an electromagnetic pulse or EMP. To test this, another Boeing Company engineer on the team, Robert Reichert, tried introducing a 10-volt pulse onto a data line, but it only emulated the shutdown intermittently. The problem with this theory is that the technology of the day made generating an EMP of sufficient magnitude to enter the shielded system a very difficult proposition, requiring large, heavy, bulky equipment. Lightning and problems in the commercial power system were ruled out as the source of the problem too. William Dutton, another Boeing Company engineer, checked commercial power interruptions and stated,
No anomalies were found in this area.
several military sections and other engineering firms participated in the investigation, but no positive cause for the shutdowns was ever found, despite extensive and concentrated effort. The US Air Force has confirmed that all of Echo flight's missiles, and most of Oscar flights, had shut down within seconds of each other and that no cause for this could be found. But despite this, the Air Force has always maintained that no reported UFO incident has ever affected national security. But this is evidently complete nonsense.
The subject of an electromagnetic pulse is nothing new. In fact, we've been creating and utilising such technology for a number of years now. Of course, the more powerful and sophisticated they are, the more disruption they can cause. The question is, did we have such technology back in 1967, when the Malmstrom Air Force Base incident took place? As far as I'm aware, there were never any official explanation as to how these ICBMs were in fact shut down. Apparently, it was a complete mystery. Whatever these UFOs represented, they clearly utilised advanced technology far more than what we currently have today.
UFOs, alien or otherwise, were definitely sighted by highly trained Air Force personnel, all of whom would have monthly psychological and physical assessments. And this coincided with the totally unexplained shutdown of 18 ICBMs, leaving the US defences seriously compromised. Indeed, in one previously classified message, Strategic Air Command Headquarters described the Echo flight incident as a loss of strategic alert of all 10 missiles within 10 seconds of each other for no apparent reason, and a cause for grave concern. So which is it? UFOs on some kind of mysterious strategic mission undermining the US's defences? Or mass hallucinations affecting dozens of Air Force personnel who are responsible for the security of nuclear missiles and whose fingers are close to the launch buttons? In truth, both are pretty scary.
There are quite a number of them, some of them not so good. If we take, for instance, the Polaris UFO incident, it took place in 1977 and 78. UFOs were seen firing pencil beam lights down on people, on houses. In fact, those beams of lights were said to have travelled right through the walls and hit people sleeping in their beds. I woke up in tremendous pain and not being able to move for a minute or so whilst this incident unfolded. Paralysed and in pain, once it over, they jumped from their beds and ran out in panic into the streets. These objects were targeting people on purpose. What they were doing is unknown. What was left behind was small puncture wound marks and people which were suffering from anemia. The iron content had been taken from their bodies. We have to ask the questions of why these sort of things happen. The objects in this case from Polaris came from the sea, and eventually military people came in and apparently birthed the Project Plato or Project Saucer, and it's probably one of the most fascinating, well-documented cases in UFO history. Nevertheless though, it's not the only time these things have happened. Also happened in India and a very similar village. Small amount of people, isolated, no policing, no military, came out of the night sky at them and of course attacked people. What were they doing? Well, was it some type of experiment? Who knows? Beams of light have been associated to UFOs for many, many years and are even represented in old paintings from the 1300s and 1400s. What do they represent? We really do not know. But the technology that they have is incredible. And it would seem that the phenomena has never really changed much over the centuries. It seems to represent the very same thing from hundreds of years ago to modern day. These pencil beam lights seems to be part and parcel of the UFO phenomena as it's depicted in movies and TV shows that we see currently on today's television. Nevertheless, they continue to be a mystery. And of course, these incidents don't seem to go away. More and more of these incidents are coming forward with reports of UFOs firing pencil beam lights down on people, onto houses and homes, even into lakes, and claiming to be sucking up water. There are so many incidents, it's hard to list them all. Funnily, people often refer UFO researchers as the experts, and I often say no, we're not the experts. The only experts are the ones that probably fly these things around. Do they have an agenda? It's possible. I mean, I've asked that question quite a few times. The occupants of these UFOs, do they have an agenda? Well, in some cases, I believe yes, they may do, especially when it's certain operations, certain things taking place at strategic times and locations to evade the police and the military when they want to go ahead and conduct their experiments. Very much so. Sounds very much like an agenda. People have said to me that they've had good experiences in the abduction phenomena. You know, I've had some very good experiences. And some people have said, oh no, it was a nightmare. I never want to have that experience again. A bad experience. I often question how to judge that, how to measure that. How do you measure a good or bad experience? I've asked people who are alleged alien abductees, and I said, you know, how do you measure your experience? He said, well, I had a good experience. And when I asked the question why, they said, well, there was nothing bad about it. And you kind of get the same thing from people who have had bad experiences. They say, oh, you know, because they experience discomfort or fear. But what if it was just agenda? What if these things were just carrying out some type of order? Do they really think about how we're going to perceive it? Are they worried about what we might feel if it's something that's good or bad? I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe there is just agenda at the end of the day. Whatever they're doing, it seems to be a regular thing around the world, and it's continuing, and it's probably been going on for a very long time. It may have even been going on before pre-history. It may have even been going on before historical documentation. Who knows? Should we be concerned? Yes. I'd say yes, we should be concerned. Concerned about what they want, why they want to engage with humanity, and what's the overall result? Where is it leading to? If UFO phenomena like this has been interacting with humanity since the days before documented history, then where are we up to? Are they any nearer reaching their conclusions? Why are they still conducting what they're doing today? Maybe that's we're their test project. Maybe that we're their experiment. Maybe the whole planet is an alien zoo. Who knows? But one thing is for sure, the UFO phenomena is not going away anytime soon.
UFOs are real, and you were never supposed to see them, military official says.
Over the last year or so, there have been lots of talk surrounding US military UFO footage taken by pilots, in particular 3 different videos that have been named the Tic Tac UFO, the Gimbal and the Go Fast. Like many other researchers, I've also scrutinised this footage, which I believe to be authentic. However, as to what the UFOs represent is another matter entirely. There's still considerable debate in regards to what these strange crafts are and who really own them.
The official government line is that the US military is not interested in UFO sightings, does not investigate them, and would certainly not consider them a threat. Seems to be changing as more and more documents and videos of unexplained objects in the sky doing incredible things are released to the public. In December 2017 and March 2018, the New York Times released 3 allegedly declassified videos showing US Navy pilots following a number of unidentified flying objects. The mystery crafts moved at hypersonic speeds, flying tens of thousands of feet above the Earth with no obvious wings, engines, or visible signs of propulsion. Were they alien craft? Super high-tech drones? The pilots involved did not have a clue, and according to a recent statement from Navy intelligence officials, neither does the US government.
I think it's certainly a question we should be asking. Are these UFOs ours? There are many people that believe it's impossible for us to have such advanced technology. However, that's been proven many times to be an inaccurate statement. We regularly see new technology coming forward every day. We see it on our television screens. Technology that may have been first developed and utilised many years back. As an example, let's take the F-117A Nighthawk stealth fighter. Now, like many others, I first saw this enter the scene during Operation Desert Storm, when these incredible aircraft were seen in action. According to official documentation and even books from Lockheed Developments, the stealth fighter was likely being test flown in 1973-74. Of course, back then, anyone seeing such an unusual streamlined triangular darting across the skies of Nevada would have certainly thought it to be a UFO, and may have actually reported it so. On such occasions, I think the United States Air Force would welcome that conclusion. It's certainly better than having people shout up from the rooftops. I've just seen a top secret exotic aircraft being test flown. It's possible that it could be a process of incredible technology being utilised. And to be honest, I think the American military forces are certainly factions of them, could be actually keeping this secret very well.
In a statement delivered to the intelligence news website The Black Vault, Joseph Gradisher, official spokesman for the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare, said, "The Navy designates the objects contained in these videos as unidentified aerial phenomena." When asked why the US Navy uses the phrase UAP and not UFO, Mr. Gradisher added, "The unidentified aerial phenomena terminology is used because it provides the basic descriptor for the sightings, observations of unauthorized, unidentified aircraft objects that have been observed entering, operating in the airspace of various military-controlled training ranges. Gradish's statement means that unexplained videos are authentic and that the objects which were detected in restricted military training airspaces in 2004 and 2015 were not supposed to be there. The objects still have not been officially identified as any known type of aircraft. Gradisher also told the Black Vault that the UFO footage was also never cleared for public release, meaning that the existence of these 3 unidentified objects was never supposed to be known about. According to the Black Vault, it's possible that the videos were mistakenly released by a former Pentagon employee who had applied for permission to share them across several government agencies as part of a database on unmanned aerial vehicles, UAV, he was apparently compiling. This person received permission to share the videos for US government use only, paperwork obtained by the Black Vault shows. Interestingly, however, Navy officials never declassified the footage for public release, according to Gradisher. The videos were never officially released to the general public by the Department of Defense and should still be withheld, said a Pentagon spokesman, Susan Gough, to the Black Vault earlier this year. Mr. Gradisher, on behalf of the Navy, confirmed the Pentagon's position by adding the Navy has not released the videos to the general public. So what specifically was the Navy trying to withhold? Perhaps the astonishing aerobatics shown by the strange vehicles. In one incident filmed in 2004, for example, the unidentified objects appeared suddenly at 80,000 feet and then hurtled towards the sea, eventually stopping at 20,000 feet and hovering, the New York Times wrote. Then they either dropped out of radar range or shot straight back up.
I cannot help think that when such things get apparently leaked to the public accidentally, that such acts are carried out on purpose, a way of disclosing information without really disclosing it. Could there be a reason why the Pentagon would want us to have this information? Is there more to this plan? Could it be that it's a form of disclosure? Well, a bit of it at least, certainly some of it. Or is there something later to come? It could be just simply our own technology. It's all down to what we really believe. It's all down to the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Are they ours? Are they theirs?
According to the New York Times, this unexplainable encounter in 2004 was the most bizarre. The incident involved the mission of Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, who were in training over the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego at the time. Some way into the mission, they received a strange call from a radio operator who said that the military had been tracking strange aircraft in the region for about 2 weeks. Sometimes these flying craft made sudden maneuvers, dove tens of thousands of feet, or even hovered, according to the reports. Asked to investigate, Fravor and Slate eventually spotted one of the objects. About 40 feet, 12 meters long, it was hovering 50 feet, 15 meters above the ocean. Fraser descended. The object ascended to meet him, and then it veered suddenly. It accelerated like nothing I've ever seen, he said in an interview with The Times, adding that he was pretty weirded out. A few minutes later, the object disappeared, he added. Fravor returned to his carrier ship, where people made fun of him for what he claimed to have seen. Inexplicably, his superiors didn't look into the matter at all, and Fravor moved on with his career, at one time serving in the Persian Gulf as air support during the Iraq operations.
One can imagine all hell breaking loose should those UFOs have been anything other than our own technology. The naval fleet could have easily engaged without anyone ever knowing anything. After all, the incidents took place out at sea, 150 miles out, in a location that doesn't really have any civilian flights passing over, nor many ships passing through it. It's a location where specialised naval training exercises take place. Of course, being so far out at sea, no one have even seen it from the shorelines of Mexico. Nothing. A perfect location. Much more secure than Area 51. It's certainly food for thought.
Fravor's account includes a video, one of a number of such recorded as part of the programme. The video shows a small object skirting from side to side and circling in view of the camera. The Times added that the witnesses also underwent certain tests after their encounters to see how the experience had affected them. I can tell you, I think it was not from this world, Favre added in a separate interview with ABC News. I'm not crazy, haven't been drinking. It was after 18 years of flying. I've seen pretty much about everything that I can see in that realm, and this was nothing close. Although the US government has been secretly investigating unidentified flying objects since 2007, officials claimed that the classified UFO hunting efforts shut down permanently in 2012 after funding disappeared. However, in December 2017, the New York Times reported that the group is still very much in existence and active. The group is officially known as the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. It was launched by the U.S. Department of Defense in 2007 and operated with an annual budget of $22 million from 2008 to 2011, the Times discovered during a recent investigation.
It's been speculated by a number of researchers that Robert Bigelow of the Bigelow Aerospace had received funding himself on occasion in regard to certain projects, one of which may have been associated with the notorious ranch we know as Sherman, the Sherman Ranch, or also Skinwalker. Bigelow may have also been very aware of ATIP.
Although Pentagon officials did reveal the existence of the program, they claimed that it ceased operations in 2012, the Times reported. However, the former head of the program said that ATIP in fact remained active in the years after 2012 and that he continued to oversee the organization until his resignation in October 2017, citing the department's excessive secrecy and internal opposition as the cause. And he was succeeded by someone else after his departure, according to the Times. As part of the program, aerospace experts investigated and described sightings and video recordings of mysterious objects that did not fit easy explanations. They also conducted tests on witnesses to sightings of UFOs to see if and how they may have been affected by the experience, according to the Times. One video example from the project, the time and date of which were withheld by the government, showed a fast-moving, spinning and glowing aircraft recorded in mid-air by Navy pilots in an FA-18 Super Hornet. The secret program had been inaugurated by Nevada Democratic Senator Harry Reid, then the Senate Majority Leader, who secured $22 million with bipartisan support for the study of military sightings of UFOs. Reid said the office produced so many reports and studies that it is almost like a book. That money was spent developing page after page of information, he said, where people in the past had seen things and not one person but hundreds of people as a result of that. There's been a lot of activity since then. Reid still takes the matter of UFOs seriously. In June 2019, led by the then former state majority leader, was quoted as saying that the US had to keep up with similar UFO investigation programs by rival powers such as China and Russia. We've had some UFOs seen near our military installations in South Dakota out that way, Reid said. At our missile defense systems, where they come out of the ground, quite often UFOs are seen. So I don't know what all these things are, but I do believe that we should take a look at them, he said. Reid added that some of the most credible stories and sightings of UFOs have come from US military pilots. Pilots who were once afraid to tell their superiors about UFO sightings, but all that has changed. In fact, the US Navy is drafting new guidelines for pilots who witness unidentified aircraft due to the increase in sightings near sensitive military facilities and Navy strike groups at sea. Originally, pilots were afraid to tell their superiors because they were concerned that it would hurt their promotions, which it would have done, Reid said. But now, pilots have an obligation to start reporting them, and the reason for that is the work that we did.
It was reported that numerous pilots, once they got back to the strike group, tried to get answers as to what they had seen. Further reports of visuals on radar confirmation seemingly disappeared. Data had been removed, logs and events phantomly vanished. And when pilots discussed the incidents with their officials, they were immediately dismissed and given no importance whatsoever. In fact, they weren't even told not to talk about it. Of course, you have to consider when given an order to, not to talk about something, it kind of gives it some type of credence or importance. It's a high-ranking official simply wanted these incidents to go away, it seems. Why is that? I do not know. Could it be that at the highest level, someone knew exactly what was happening and that there was no defence significance? Could it simply boil down to the strange crafts were, in fact, our own?
Crucially, advances in military technology have given pilots the ability to capture better photos and video of the UFOs, Reid said. Pilots have reported objects that can do things that are impossible for US military jets to duplicate. We do not have any type of craft with the ability to do what they do, he said. We have jet airplanes that fly at 750 miles per hour. These things, they estimate, go over 3,000 miles per hour. I think it is something we need to look at. News of Reid's secret work funding UFO research and ATIP were revealed in December of 2017 when the New York Times and Politico both published stories on the subject. When I was contacted by the New York Times, they said they wanted to do a story on UFOs and the money you got, the $22 million, Reid said. And I said, I'm happy to do that story as long as we're not talking about little green men. If you want to talk about science, I'm all in, and that is how I looked at it. So, were the best naval fleet in the world being tested along with their specialized radar systems? Researchers have stated the following. The US Navy FA-18 Super Hornet pilots encountered unidentified flying objects at over 30,000 feet while conducting training missions off the east coast of the United States in 2014 and 2015. It was the first time the most advanced sensor fusion, networking and computer processing capabilities available were united across an operational carrier strike group. One of the ships already had a track record of encounters. The USS Nimitz, including her wing and escorts, encountered the famous Tic Tac off the Baja coast, northwest of Mexico in 2004. The Nimitz-class aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt had just returned from a significant 4-year overhaul in 2013, which included systems associated with the latest operational iteration of the Navy's Cooperative Engagement Capability, CEC. When the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group encountered the Tic Tac in 2004, it was in the midst of the first ever CSG-level operations of the initial iteration of the CEC. The CEC uses the strike group's diverse and powerful surveillance sensors, including the Spy-1 radars on Aegis combat system-equipped cruisers and destroyers, as well as the E-2 Hawkeye's radar picture from on high, and fuses that information into a common picture via data links and advanced computer processing. This in turn provides very high-fidelity tracks of targets thanks to telemetry from various sensors operating at different bands and looking at the same target from different aspects and at different ranges. Instead of the objects such as stealth fighters disappearing and reappearing on normal radar systems, with the CEC, the target will remain steady on both platforms. CEC-enabled screens are seeing fused data from both sources and likely many others as well. The data link connectivity and the quality of the enhanced telemetry means that ships and aircraft could also fire on targets without needing to use their own sensor data. The CEC enhances the ability to engage opponents using remotely launched weapons. In 2004, the incident off the Baja coast was the most opportune time to capture the very best real-world sensor data on a high-performance target in near lab-like control settings offered by the restricted airspace. The Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group's encounters with UFOs only began towards the end of 2014, according to the Times. In closing, it's hard to overstress just how opportune the conditions would have been for this particular CSG, or elements of it, equipped with the world's best air defense capabilities, to be tested against exotic and high-performance flying craft. It is also curious that sightings of these objects would coincide with the first major deployment of the CEC, NIFC-CA architecture and the E-2D Hawkeye, and then more would occur around the time of the strike group's work up to the first operational deployment of those systems.
Discovered in numerous official documents, the United States Secretary of Navy is listed as an assignee on several radical aviation technologies, patented by an aerospace engineer working at a Naval Air Warfare Center aircraft division in headquarters in Maryland. One of these patents describes a hybrid aerospace underwater craft, claimed to be capable of extraordinary feats of speed and manoeuvrability in the air, in the water and outer space during the revolutionary electromagnetic propulsion system being used. Now, this is referenced as transmedium travel in the ATIP program, and they have listed that these crafts could exist, believing that they're actually more UFO orientated. However, the patent may describe that these things could be ours. The patent is highly complex and describes methods of reducing the mass of an aircraft using various techniques, including the generation of gravity waves, which were detected in 2016 after being produced when two black holes collided. Although the US Navy applied for the patent in 2016 and was granted in 2018, it doesn't necessarily mean that the craft has been built and tested. However, a number of ex-employees of the US Navy have stated, well, if they've submitted a patent, then it means that they already have it. It is known that a number of patents on new advanced drones were submitted long after they had been designed and test flown. Details of ATIP were first released in 2017, including reports of sightings made by fighter pilots from the USS Nimitz. These pilots saw a huge patch of churning turbulent water the size of a Boeing 737, suggesting something was beneath the surface, as well as a tic-tac shaped aircraft which zoomed off at almost impossible high speeds. It's now time to seriously consider that we could be the proud owners of some advanced aerial vehicles that can behave in these numerous different ways. Is it a real UFO phenomena? I really don't know. For now, all we can sit back and see what unfolds.